Alright, here we go. Here today, a live review of the Crown Royal Single Malt Canadian Whiskey. Delicately crafted in the Canadian gold. Um, this is some kind of special release Crown Royal product here. And of course, it's got the bag. It's actually harder than you would expect to get with these bags these days, because regular Crown in Canada doesn't come in these bags. Does it come in the purple bag in the States still? I don't know, but in Canada, these things don't tend to come in a purple bag anymore. It's actually kind of hard to get a bag these days. I don't know what the deal is, but we will slowly undress this fancy lad, I suppose. Of course, this is a Diageo product. Crown Royal is a Diageo brand. But this one does not come from the Gimli distillery, as I'm told, which most Crown Royal comes from. This comes from the Valleyfield distillery near Montreal. That is maybe where all their malt products get made? I don't know. Actually not 100% sure. But this one, I'm told, is a single malt, so it has to come from one distillery, and that distillery is apparently the Valleyfield distillery. Of course, Canadian single malt whiskey. It is 45% alcohol or 90 proof. It is probably chill filtered and probably has color added. But they do say it is about 10 years old in New Charlotte Oak. So that's kind of a little different for Canadian whiskey, I suppose. They forgot my favorite barrel, ex-Canadian whiskey. They didn't use that one for this, I think. This note does say 10 years in New Charlotte Oak. I don't know if it's number 4 or what, but that being said, it really doesn't taste like New Charlotte Oak. And it really doesn't taste like it's 10 years old either. At least not in my previous experience. But I guess we'll see how we feel about it today. And of course, Crown Royal, if you don't know, the heritage, I suppose. This was created by Seagram's, the Seagram's company back in the day. And that company is now blown up in bits and pieces and owned by random different megacorps, I suppose. The Seagram's company made this for the tour of King George the Sixth. For the tour of Canada, 1939. Is it King George the Sixth? Which is George? The George we have now, is he George 7? King George 6. Yes. So the one we have now must be 7. George. Wait. Oh, it's Charles. I'm an idiot. It's King Charles now. Charles the Third, yeah. His name is not George. That's how much I know about the Canadian monarch. I forgot his name was Charles and not George. Holy fuck. Alright. Al Crack de Coco, welcome back. Despite the fact that you don't speak English, you keep coming back, and I appreciate that. Alright, so again, we'll rate this at a 100. 25 for aroma, 25 for palate, 25 for finish, 10 for texture, and 15 for my personal subjective opinion of this supposedly limited Crown Royal product. And from what I remember of this particular whiskey, it's kind of like slightly Canadian whiskey creamy. It's like slightly citrus. And not a whole lot else. Maybe it's malty too. But we'll see how we feel about it today. Again, this is had some drink through. It's been sitting for quite a while. So, that'll perhaps give it some help. Some much needed help, because I don't feel like I historically have thought too highly of this bottle. But here it is for it's not an age statement. No, it's not an age statement, but the sources I read said roughly 10 years new charred oak barrel. Obviously, in the Canadian climate, I suppose. And it's not 40% alcohol. You know, that's the nice thing. I don't know if Crown Royal is like typically 80 proof in the United States or in export markets, but um, a lot of times Crown around here is around 45%. That's respectable. That's a respectable percentage. You know, they're not giving you the bottom basement proof. So 45, that's reasonable. We can't, we can't hate on that. It's still one shy of the 46 that we like. That's the golden number 46 we like to give. But 45, Let me give that a minute. It's still got some ethanol vapors coming off of it. At least I assume that's ethanol. I'm actually getting, I'm actually getting a little bit of cherry fruit right now, which is weird. This is nosing a lot closer to a new charred oak barrel today for some reason. I'm kind of getting some of that cherry and some of that wood. A little bit of spiciness. A little bit of that butteriness. That's kind of funny. Because I don't remember feeling like this was overly new barrel forward in the past. But I'm feeling it today. Definitely some citrus to it. Canadian whiskey at its finest? Well, it's really not, because it's single malt. Canadian whiskey at its finest would be true Canadian whiskey where they put some fucking sherry in there or something like that. But this is single malt, so... yeah, there's only some citrus, but a little bit of cherry, some woods playing on it, a little bit of spiciness. Man, there's a little bit of like vanilla and spice in that. And I don't remember it being like that before, but every day is a new dram. In Canada, this goes for around 90 Canadian dollars. But I do know it's also available in US markets. I don't know about Europe, but... so it's about twice the price of that's more than twice the price. It's like 120% the increased price over like a regular Crown, if that makes any kind of relevance. So if you know your price of Crown Royal, give it like plus 120%. That's like roughly the price, I suppose. Not very malty though. Again, it's not really that complicated. It's like new charred oak barrel notes light, like light versions of them, not very aggressive, slightly woody, slight cherry, but there's like a strong like citrus component. I'm gonna call it lemon today. It's not very malty though. I expected more malt component, but again, there's a little bit, vanilla, some zesty spices. That cherry that I got initially is like faint. And there is a woodiness about it. Not the worst. All right. Crown Royal. Single malt. On the palate. Cheers. And it's sweet, a little bit creamy like a Canadian whiskey typically tends to be. But a little bit woody though. Honestly, more woody than I remember. But again, palate is like a little bit spicy, mostly sweet, a little bit of that citrus note. Into like a pretty short woody finish. Finish length is like, I don't know, short plus. Finish is nothing to write home about. Like, very insignificant. I don't know if I just internalized the fact that this is a new charred oak barrel today or what, but feels like the NCO notes are like way more apparent today than the times I've had this before. There is a kind of grain component here that I guess has to be malt because it's a malt whiskey, but it doesn't come across like the same way that you find malt in Scotch. It's kind of like, how would I put it? It's kind of like a spicy hay. Like, almost rye-like. It's like a rye-like note, but it's not rye, obviously. But I think that's like just the spiciness that's probably barrel related is like closely interwoven with the like maltiness of it. Not finding very much deeper characteristics to this. It's kind of like washed over a little bit. That's not like a great sign. Because one of my favorite things about, like, especially like Scotch whiskeys is, you know, especially if you like a peated Scotch whiskey that's got some additional barrel character. You go through like a stage where it's like really smoky, and then you go through a stage where it's like really like barrel related, and then you go through a stage where it's like malty and sweet, almost like in stages as you like acclimate to like the different components of the dram. But I've kind of like gotten through some stuff, and now it's kind of like not a lot happening, you know? It's like there's almost like a slight maltiness at the bottom of it, and not much else. Like the cherry's gone, and the citrus is gone, and like the barrel is gone. And there's like a slight spicy maltiness to it, like at the bottom of all those other layers. And it's like not very interesting. It gave me those other things initially, which was nice, I suppose. It doesn't lack for intensity. It does kind of feel like a Crown Royal product, somewhat. It kind of drinks like one. It does like remind me of, like, for example, that Harvest Rye that we also have. Like there's some like, how would you say, distillery DNA almost, it feels like, going on in there, despite them being completely different grains. but the aroma doesn't impress me at this point. It's kind of like gone muted. And the palate has like some spiciness, good amount of sweetness, some wood. Finish is like, again, spicy and woody. Not a whole lot else. Not much else to speak of. There's a good sweetness about it, and some like hints of citrus are in there in terms of like the palate, but it's not. I'm not excited by it. It feels like a watered down bourbon. Like I hate to say. It feels like um it feels like an American single malt that was aged in a new charred oak barrel. That's kind of like the vibe I get. It's like an American single malt whiskey that was aged in new oak instead of like a reused barrel like Scotch is. That's kind of what it feels like. And to some extent, that's kind of like what it is. It's just, it's a Canadian single malt instead of an American single malt that was aged in a new barrel. I don't know. I don't know if this would have been any better if it was like not malt. Like if it was like a corn product or something like that. But I feel like I'm not getting what the malt has to offer. I feel like I'm still getting barrel related notes right now. And those aren't unique, you know, like every bourbon is using new charred oak barrels, you know, this slight cherry, a little bit of butteriness, spice and wood, with like kind of a typical brown sugar kind of sweetness. It's very common. This is obviously aged in Canada where the barrel impact isn't nearly as strong because it's cold. Maybe that added a bit to the creaminess of the sweetness. But I feel like the strongest, like, what makes single malt unique is the malt, right? Like the malt components are what's the most interesting variable in single malt whiskeys, I find. And I feel like despite the fact that this isn't as strong and aggressive as a bourbon, it's like still those barrel notes overrid whatever malt character was in here. And it's leaves me wanting. Yeah, I don't know. All right, let's talk about the aroma out of 25. Again, initially, some nice like cherry, citrus, wood, spice, a little bit of creaminess, a little bit of like butteriness. Kind of like goes down to like nothing after a while though. It transitions poorly, I guess is the best way to put it. Not wanting for too much intensity, but the notes are a little bit muddled and stepping over each other, and you have to spend some time picking at them. I give the aroma 15. All right, and palate at 25. Again, sweet, bit spicy. Maybe not mild citrus components. Not bad, but nothing exciting. 14. The finish at 25, which again is not terribly long, spicy and woody, not too exciting. You're gonna get some spice, get some barrel wood, maybe like an undercurrent on that sweet note. Not very long. 13. All right, we'll talk about the texture. Out of 10. Not particularly thin, but the thickness is not perfect. We'll give it 4. So out of 15, my personal experience with this Crown Royal Single Malt Canadian Whiskey. I think all I have to say about this is I wish they used a maybe a bit of a meme, but I wish they used an ex-Canadian whiskey barrel for this. I don't know if like their idea was like, hey, let's make a more premium release. We'll use a new charred oak barrel. We'll give it we'll spend on the barrel. Give it a new barrel. But I think the best part about Scotch is that they very rarely use a virgin oak barrel, and part of the reason is because I feel like malt really is the kind of whiskey, malt whiskey, the actual grain has a lot to say when it comes to flavor. And I think using new barrels just overrides the uniqueness of the distillate. And judging by this, I can't tell you if the single malt distillate coming out of Valleyfield is any good, because it feels like it was overwritten mostly by new barrel impact. I feel like I'm tasting something like a watered down bourbon in this instance. So, I wish they would have used a barrel that was more inert. Used an ex-bourbon barrel. First fill would have been fine, even if you want to use something that's a bit more robust. First fill ex-bourbon would have been fine. But I feel like this new barrel just did too much of this, and I wanted to taste more of the distillate. I wanted to get more like citrus and malt components out of this, and I feel like I got too much barrel. At least today. I don't feel like I remember it being so barrel forward in the past, but at least today for sure, on the day that we score it, kind of felt like it was too barrel forward for me. Drank like a watery bourbon almost, like a bourbon that just wasn't aggressive enough on the barrel, but still too strong to get a good feel of the malt. And that's what's important, I think. Like, they should have kind of tried to craft this more like a Scotch and less like what is a lot of American single malt whiskeys these days, which is kind of just like a malt whiskey that they aged like a bourbon, which I think they're going to learn eventually. a lot of these North American distilleries that malt takes better to a less impactful barrel. I think they just are kind of like used to bourbon and bourbon cells, and they're using new oak barrels for this stuff. And I get the feeling that eventually we'll get some more kind of like less barrel forward North American malt products, but this isn't it. And just wish it was in a less impactful barrel. And maybe it's the kind of thing where like the more I'm into whiskey, the less I'm interested in like what the barrels taste like, because I know what the barrels taste like. You know, what I'm interested in is what makes the whiskeys unique, what makes a distillery's distillate unique. And it's hard to taste that with a strong barrel, even if that's like a first fill Oloroso sherry butt. That might be a little aggressive, you know. First for especially barrel finished, you know, for some whiskeys, you know, slowly my favorite barrel is becoming refill ex bourbon. So like that soliloquy to say, I wish this was in an ex-Canadian whiskey barrel and not in a new charred oak barrel, and maybe it would have been a better whiskey, in my opinion. That being said, it's a little different. It's not quite forgettable. It's maybe a 5 max. We'll give a 5. So 5, 15, 20, 34. How to math 44, 47, 51. It's a 51 out of 100. It's barely good. Good. Barely. Barely good.